In this presentation, we'll discuss and explore the self-defeating masochistic tendencies as they're expressed in self-sabotage, procrastination, relationship difficulties, and other psychological problems. Freud was perhaps the first one who addressed the issue of masochism in a systematic way through his system of psychoanalysis and psychotherapeutically in his work with his patients. In this presentation, the basic great discoveries and insights will be presented insofar as they are related to the topic of this course. We will not deal with psychoanalytic method of treatment based on free associations and interpretation. Instead, we'll use a non-dualistic method. The concept of non-duality is not a new one. It has been with us for a while, originating in the ancient mystical traditions. It reappeared again in the last century in quantum mechanics, and it's been stated by its founders in the interpretation of quantum mechanics as their observer and observed are one. Later on, it was introduced by J. Krishnamurti in the areas of psychology and spirituality. He often expressed it as the observer is the observed, the experiencer is the experiencer, and their thinker is the thought. We all know that quantum mechanics brought tremendous changes, especially in the field of technology. And we can expect as important changes in the field of psychology and spirituality when we are dealing with mental states of the mind, such as, let's say, perception, awareness, thinking process. All this involves intricate neuron structures of the brain. And this neuron structure could have some affinity with elementary particles of quantum mechanics more than with the macro object of this world, at least as far as their size is concerned. A non-dualistic method is a non-conflictual method. This approach doesn't involve any fight, any struggle within oneself, no conflicts, but it's more than that. A non-duality may bring a different concept of change. It's not just the process of change, but non-duality, the experiencing of non-duality is a change itself. In other words, there is no time. The change is instantaneous. We will deal a lot with this question of non-duality later on. Freud was, in 1924, he introduced a new concept, a death instinct, adding up to his earlier concept of libido or eros instinct or drive. And a death instinct is a self-destructive instinct. It has self as an object. In other words, it's directed against the person himself. Fortunately, Freud maintained that these two instincts are not acting independently. They are pure form, as it were. They are mixed together. They are combined in quantitative degrees at different times. So we can only talk about their fusion. And of course, if death instinct in their fusion prevails, then we can talk about that self-destructive tendencies are preeminent in the personality. Freud was very much aware that if we fight too much with aggressiveness, to put too much control, too much suppression, it may turn into self-destruction. In other words, sadism may turn into masochism. That's how he describes it. The holding back of aggressiveness is in general unhealthy. It leads to illness, to mortification. A person in a fit of rage often demonstrates a transition from the checking of aggressiveness to self-destructiveness by turning his aggression against himself. And then later on, we'll skip a few lines. He's saying that thus it may in general be suspected that the individual dies of his internal conflicts, but that the species dies of its unsuccessful struggle against the external world. So it's a remarkable statement. The individual dies of his internal conflicts. And that's what actually we're trying to do. We're trying to eliminate internal conflicts in a non-dualistic approach. So basically these new ideas and this, so before the death instinct was introduced, sadism was primary and masochism was secondary. After it was introduced, the masochism became primary and sadism, it just became its derivative. Not everyone accepted it. Even among psychoanalytic community, there was some dissension. Among those who accepted it was his close, one of his first and close students, Edmund Burglar. He didn't just accept his idea of death instinct. He expanded on the notion of masochism. He called it psychic masochism, which is unconscious, to distinguish it from a clinical masochism. And he considered that masochism is an all-pervasive phenomenon, underlying many psychological problems. He wrote, again, it's a very remarkable passage, the term normal and neurotic, quote unquote, are simplifications. Like all simplifications, they have been widely misunderstood. On the one hand, an ideally normal person exists only in the fantasies of neurotics, who need this unreal comparison for the purposes of self-torture. On the other hand, no neurotic is an unbroken expanse of neurosis. In his normal, quote-unquote, and therefore undiseased areas. Long ago, I suggested that a normal person be defined as one who is not too neurotic, quote-unquote. Edmund Burglar was a very prolific writer. He actually practiced in New York in the middle of last century. He's almost forgotten. Even among professionals, he is hardly mentioned. We'll present a few of his very interesting cases. But meanwhile, I would like to introduce myself and tell you briefly about my background. I graduated in physics in the former Soviet Union, in the Kharkov University, one of the oldest university in the former Soviet Union, and definitely in Ukraine. And I remember that I was intrigued with this idea of the observer and observed are one, which that's studied in physics. And actually, you know, in the former Soviet Union was strange rules. Like some books were forbidden, which had nothing to do with anti-communism. Like Freud was forbidden, but because I bought the university library, I had access to some of his books. At that time, I was very intriguing, and I'm not sure if I understood him completely. But the seeds were sown, as it were. And what's surprising, even more surprising, that Krishnamurti was forbidden. And again, because of the university library, I was able to read a few of his books. Had a tremendous impact on me. And in 1978, I left the former Soviet Union, spent a few months in Italy, and I met Krishnamurti on his way from England to India. He invited me to come to Ojai. It's a small, beautiful place not far from Santa Barbara, up in the mountains, where his center was situated there. And I took part in the center activities, and later on taught in his school, took part in seminars, personal meetings, and the last time I saw Krishnamurti in his place, maybe the day or two before he passed away. It was a tremendous meeting. And later on, I started my studies in Santa Barbara at UCSB, University of California in Santa Barbara, and later and wrote my thesis after a while on master thesis on Kant and Immanuel Kant. Then I left the West Coast, came to New York, continued studying a little bit psychoanalysis, attended some classes in the psychoanalytic institutes, and a little bit the seeds which were sown in the former Soviet Union grew up here. And then also I got my formal education in Adelphi University and got licensed, and since then was practicing psychotherapy. What else? Yes, I visited many times Israel and studied Kabbalah with well-known teachers, and myself really went deeply into it, read it. And I believe that some ideas of Kabbalah, actually great ideas, could be used non-dualistically, and actually they enrich a non-dualistic method, make it more tangible and effective, and that's what we're trying to do here. So let's go. Let me bring a few interesting cases, psychotherapy cases. One is from a paper written by Frederick Bush, Barbara Milred, and Marian Zinga. Miss W., an 18-year-old woman, was driving from one city to another in order to attend her 18th birthday party when she experienced her first panic attack. The attack was so severe that she had to drive off the road, call her mother in the city towards which she was driving, and ask her mother to pick her up on the highway. The process of her mother finding another person to drive with her could also drive the car back to several hours, and in the meantime, Miss W's party had to be canceled. At the moment she experienced the attack, Miss W had found herself thinking that her 18th birthday was very important to her. It symbolized her quote-unquote, quote, total independence from her family and new ability, quote-unquote, to get rid of them. In the therapy, it was discovered that that in her fantasy, turning 18 and being independent represented the emotional equivalent of killing off her parents and siblings, all of whom enraged her. So that was not really, she wasn't aware of that at the moment of the panic attack. She was just aware that she wanted to be independent, and it's very important to her. And she felt like that would be kind of get rid of her family. But her impulses of probably coming from childhood, of killing her parents and siblings, she couldn't allow them to penetrate her consciousness. And the panic attack was a consequence of her fear of these dangerous impulses would become conscious. Also, you could mention that afterwards, this panic attack, as they point out, represented a real way in which she effectively punished herself for her homicidal, not acceptable thoughts. So that has some masochistic streak in the whole in the whole problem. And I'll read a few more cases from Edmund Burglar before actually suggesting a few things regarding treatment. That's a case from the Edmund Burglar, whom I already mentioned in my introduction, a great psychotherapist, and from his books, the basic neurosis. So I'll read a few cases from this book and another book. A patient of mine, a physician, called me one evening to inform me that his friend Dr. X, also a physician, wanted him to arrange an appointment for him to consult me because of his quote-unquote personality difficulties, the nature of which wasn't specified in the telephone conversation. The appointment was made for the next day. At the appointed time, the prospective patient appeared, and after introduction started to shout in the waiting room, "I have not the slightest confidence to you." The burglar answered smilingly, "Well, this will be a short visit. Do you want to leave now?" The patient smiled, too. "No, let's have a talk." An observer who would classify the man's behavior as both irrational and aggressive. Irrational because no one forced him to consult me, burglar, without a minimum of confidence. Aggressive because, being a physician himself, he was very sensitive to the upbraidings which physicians receive from patients. I asked why he had no confidence in me. He replied that the preceding evening he had had a theoretical discussion with a physician who recommended him to me, in which they could not agree on a specific type of anesthesia. Well, that's the patient saying, well, if an analyzed man talks such nonsense, his analysis can have been a good one, though I'll admit that my friend has changed for the latter in other respects. The senselessness of his argument was augmented when I asked him, was your little speech prepared? The man admitted that it was. In other words, his resistance was impersonal and rather unfair. That's what the burglar is saying. Because he didn't give me even a chance. What would have done to a patient who entered your office sound in such manner? Asked the burglar. I'd throw him out, was a prompt reply. That was exactly what you wanted, was my conclusion, burglar's conclusion. In other words, the man used pseudo-aggression to achieve masochistic pleasure. The naive observer would diagnose his behavior as aggression. The analyst as psychic masochism covered by pseudo-aggression. The whole life of this patient was based on that technique. And before discussing this case, let me read another case from a burglar. Another book. It's called. It's a long title, but the beginning: Counterfeit Sex. A young man consulted a physician, stating that after seeing a motion picture, he became impotent with his wife. The situation persisted for months. His depression and despondency were marked. The film was The Human Beast, of dramatization of Émile Zola's, French author, Émile Zola's novel. In it, the protagonist shrinks from having intercourse because he fears that in his sexual frenzy he might strangle the heroine. This attitude is erroneously attributed by Zola to hereditary alcoholism. The young man couldn't forget the central scene, apply the situation to himself, and feared that he too would commit such a crime. He became completely impotent and fell close to a quote-unquote nervous breakdown. The physician who was interested in analysis sent his patient along to me, to Burglar, stating, "The man identifies himself with the murderer. His guilt makes him impotent." I questioned that assumption immediately, because if this had been his real conflict, the patient wouldn't have become aware of it. Let's discuss these cases. Let's start with a patient suffering from impotency. Burglar suggests that this patient identified himself with an endangered, suffering girl. That was a psychic masochist identification. His conscience vetoed that identification. It was not acceptable. So his aggression served as a blind, as a cover for his passivity. Actually, by identifying with the girl, not with aggressors, but with the girl, he didn't need to be potent. He was receiving unconscious masochistic pleasure of being endangered girl. Burglar is saying, if you interpreted to him that his cause of his problem, his aggression, he would gladly accept that because it would fit to his masculine personality. Yeah, aggression, he's aggressive, but he still has some strength, and he's also cares about his wife. But he wouldn't be able to decrease that aggression because that aggression's needed for covering, as I said, covering his basic masochistic identification. And after the patient realized that and was able to see the real cause as a psychic masochism, passivity as a cause of his impotency, he was cured. Let's consider the second case, the case of a physician coming to see the burglar. During the analysis, Burglar writes, it was discovered that the patient developed this technique of provoking conflicts early in childhood, repeating it later on in life as a parent. He was not conscious of provoking conflicts. He was only conscious of the aggressive reaction of the person attacked. So he fought back on his side, seemingly in self-defense, versed in righteous indignation. As a final act, he felt pity to himself. Oh, poor me, it could only happen to me. In his final self-pity, he was not aware that he was enjoying psychic masochist pleasure of being mistreated. What practical implication we can draw from these cases, from these considerations? First of all, that self-pity is present almost in every depressive state of mind. And in spite of fighting with depression, trying to get rid of it, or giving in, or running away, it's still there. But if we realize that self-pity is the hidden enemy, it's really hidden. We are producing this self-pity. not being aware of it. So when the whole thing unfolds, suffering, self-pity, we see self-pity, that the whole thing changes. I remember the statement by Krishnamurti, who said, what is beyond, is already beyond. Quote unquote, what is already beyond. What does it mean? It means that what is reality. When there is reality, there is no problem. The problem is that we don't see the whole spectrum of what is. Like in depressive situation, we don't really see that self-pity is a constituent of that's the whole thing, of the whole depressive situation. So we see how Burglar and Krishnamurti together help us to find a quick and effective way of dealing with depression and be free of it. See you in the next videos. Why do I pay so much attention to non-duality? Not because it gives us some state of bliss, some state of unity, intoxication, cave, although it's a very blissful state, of course. But what is more important, it gives us a chance to discover what is hidden. What is hidden is usually unconscious, repressed. And non-duality gives us a chance to reveal all that. And that's important for our task to see what's going on in self-defeating tendencies, in psychic masochism, in procrastination, self-sabotage. So let's do a short version of this non-dualistic exercise and see how it works. So let's sit comfortably. Close our eyes. And we just pay attention to what's going on. Again, no relaxation, no meditation. We just get acquainted with our physical sensations. So feel our toes, feet, ankles, knees, thighs, fingers, hands, arms, shoulders. Any tension on our face, could be lips, some tension, tongue, and of course our eyes, so much in front of the computer we may feel irritation, inflammation, or just the eyelids pressure. Okay, the forehead, scalp, the back of the head. Neck is a continuation of the back of the head, and spine is a continuation of the neck. Our abdomen, breathing, of course, inhaling and exhaling. A solar plexus as the energy center. Again, we feel our fingers, our knees, ankles, feet, and the toes. We started from the toes and came back to the toes. But perhaps we feel now the whole body, the energy as a whole. This is not non-dualistic, it's not dualistic, it's just a base, preliminary exercise. How can we go further? We just asked the question, and it's very important because asking the question is the key to all exercises. We're asking the question whether whatever is experienced, even on the physical level now, whether this is separate from us who experience that. Is experience different from the experiencer? Again, I'm not waiting for the answer. The question, if it's asked sincerely and seriously, unfolds itself. So as whatever is experienced now on a physical level, whether it's different from the experiencer or they are one. So question may unfold itself. If it doesn't unfold, so wait for another time. We can ask it again. It's not immediately revealed. It's not immediately, if we're asking this question for the first time in our life, it would be a little bit preposterous to expect the answer right away. And again, we probably notice some thoughts in our mind, some emotions, some expectations, some desires. If thought different from a thinker, or thinker is the thought, on emotional level is the whatever is experienced is different from experienced. Where's the question? And we stay with the question. And if we, by chance, start feeling that there is unity, there is no duality, and there is no artificial entity which observes, controls, likes, dislikes, then there is a state of presence, a state where we can address all the hidden tendencies, hidden emotions, whatever is called unconscious. And it's a great advantage, by the way, because otherwise if we don't ask this question and we go to the regular psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, we have to spend years perhaps to discover there are some hidden self-defeating tendencies in us. But now, if we really come to this state of non-duality, all of it could be revealed right away. And we could possibly accomplish whatever we're supposed to accomplish in a doctor's office, we can accomplish by ourselves, with ourselves. So let's close our eyes again and feel that unity again, if we feel it. On a physical level, on an emotional level, on a mental level. It gives an amazing sense of freedom. Freedom from ourselves, from self-created prisons, self-created conflicts. And that's the end of this first exercise. and hope to see you again on our next exercises. Most of us are familiar with the concept of chakras, either from yoga or from other branches of Indian mystical tradition. In Kabbalah, Jewish mystical tradition, there is a concept of sfirot, which in some respects is similar to that of chakras. In both traditions, these concepts refer to the centers of energy, which are essential to the spiritual enlightenment. But at the same time, there is essential difference between these two concepts. In yoga, in Indian mystical tradition, these chakras are directly associated with the physical body, and the whole process starts from the low chakras in upward movement until their highest stage, called Nirvikalpa Samadhi or liberation, is reached. In Kabbalah, Sfirot, although you could find some correspondence between Sfirot and the physical body, but generally they refer to the spiritual body, to the spiritual realm. And also, if in chakras there is one vertical line, they are all kind of connected along one vertical line. In Kabbalah, there are 3 lines: left, right, and the middle. And the process of spiritual enlightenment, of spiritual achievement is also different. In yoga or other Indian mystical traditions, you have to reach a state of liberation, be free of suffering, free of this wheel of reincarnation, leave this physical existence, and achieve the final perfection, state of another spiritual realm. In Kabbalah, the concept, on the other hand, in Kabbalah, the concept of spiritual change and correction acquires a paramount importance. Changing yourself, changing the world along the spiritual path, of course. And how can it be accomplished? It's accomplished with the help of 10 different spiritual energy called sfirot, which are schematically could be shown along 3 lines. You could see on the picture now. On the right side, left side, and middle line. So let's take, for example, the middle line, the right line, in the middle, like with written hesed, which is usually translated as kindness, but sometimes it's translated as love or mercy. And exactly parallel to it, you see Sfira Gvura, which is translated as judgment, as strength or judgment. And you see Sfira in the middle, just underneath of this, to Sfirot, is called Tiferet, which is translated, there are many translations. There is a translation as beauty, unity, compassion. And so in right and left lines are in some sense in opposition to each other. Of course, you could see that strength, when it's can strength and become excessive, it could, without kindness, it could turn into cruelty, violence. And at the same time, hesed or kindness without strength could become weakness, could become non-effective. So the middle line accomplishes this function of unity and balance. But it's not just unity and balance. It's not just a manipulative device, which just brings the balance and constantly watches that it would be a balance and harmony between them. It has a special energy, this middle line energy, which changes the inner nature of the human being, changes, let's say, selfishness into an absolutely different state. So it's a different way of perception. It requires determination, and also it involves a deep transformation. We're going to deal with this practical usage of Kabbalah related to our topic of self-sabotage, of self-defeating tendencies, of psychic masochism. Let me mention, before we go to the practical exercises, which would hopefully give us some glimpse of Kabbalah, that there is a great danger in taking our everyday experiences and knowledge related to these concepts of kindness, love, mercy, strength, and assuming that this is a spiritual energy of Sfirot. The description is not thing itself. The description of the apple is not apple. You can have a beautiful or scientific description, how many calories there, benefits, vitamins, but you can't eat it. Taking descriptions for the real thing, it would be self-deception, self-projection. And how to avoid it, I'll try to deal with this concept. We'll try to deal with this concept together in our future applications of Kabbalah to the psychological problems. And now let's go to the practical exercise. Block consciously or unconsciously their progress by engaging in self-sabotage, which often shows in their poor self-image. Oh, I'm not worthy of success. Or having inflated self-image, which is just the opposite reaction, covering inner insecurity and guilt. And generally speaking, a low self-esteem shows itself in comparison oneself with others, in trying to please others at any cost, or having hardly any boundaries in relationship. Procrastination is just a specific case of self-sabotage, postponing one's task and goals, apparently because of the fears of the being hurt, of failing, or of the unknown. Perfectionism is another cause of procrastination. And in cognitive behavioral therapy, they consider distorted thinking patterns, which could be found in self-sabotage and procrastination. One of them would be, let's say, overgeneralization. Let's say, oh, I failed many times, so I fail now. That's an example of it. Or in emotional reasoning, like thinking that emotions are a true representative of reality. Or in catastrophizing, like seeing the worst in the unknown. And it's fine. But we can ask the question, what is the cause of all of it? What is the root of all of it? Let's recall what Edmund Burglar is saying, that there is within us a hidden structure based on getting pleasure out of displeasure. In other words, we want to fail. We want to procrastinate because unconsciously we're getting pleasure out of it. So we are creating our defeats. We are creating our problems. We are creating our sufferings without being aware of it. And now let's go to our second exercise. Now it's second exercise. Second exercise, we're going to deal with question of self-sabotage, self-defeating tendencies, procrastination. And we use some methods and ideas from Kabbalah. So let's first feel this energy of accomplishment, the energy of having a goal, and we want to achieve that goal, we want to accomplish something, and we just use it. Let's put this energy to the right side of the mental space of the mind. And the energy of procrastination, the energy of indecision, postponement, let's put to the left side. But in order to be actually dealing with not abstractions, but with the real issues, we have to feel these energies, right? Especially on the left side. On the left side, we have to somehow remember our experiences of want to do something and somehow postponing and being indecisive. So let's feel that energy. And now we ask the very unusual question. Is there anything in that energy on the left side worthwhile? Is there any spark which might be beautiful, might be worthwhile? And in order to answer this question, first of all, let's close our eyes, because not being distracted, and feel that energy of being lazy in a way, procrastinations, of indecision, of doing nothing, and asking the question again. We're not expecting the answer, but we let the question to unfold. In unfolding of the question is the answer. So we see that in that state of indecision, there is some kind of a sense of contentment, of pleasure, of being present, of not pushing ourselves in any direction. So this left side energy has some quality of peace. And on the right side, where our desire to accomplish our goals are there, we just ask the same question, and we see that that's also beautiful, because there is their desire to be helpful, to help others. There is a sense of caring, kindness. So these two energies, which are at the opposite sides of our mental space in the mind, they're not the opposite, but they don't contradict each other. And because we see that two energy, so we kind of ourselves, our consciousness, in between these two energies. And seeing them as both beautiful, useful, great. Let's unite them. Let's give to the our right energy, a little bit of the left, a little bit of peace and contentment. And let's give to the left a little bit of that quality of helping and kindness. And let's feel how there's enrichment. There's enrichment in our consciousness. There is no fight, there is no struggle, there is no conflict. But we used whatever appeared to be conflictual. We made it beneficial. We made it holistic. Or, as they say in Kabbalah, we changed bitter into sweet. What is dualistic approach? Is it either fighting, struggling with our problem, suppressing, repressing, projecting, or vice versa, giving in and being enslaved? In neither one of these approaches works. So that's why we were talking about a non-dualistic approach. A non-dualistic approach is, first of all, is there observer and observed awareness. We talked about it. And a second one coming from Kabbalah. It's called about elevation of sparks. Seeing that in every negative manifestation there is something beautiful, positive, which has to be brought up, elevated. And there's a strange thing. If somebody feels like somebody, oh gosh, I fell to such a low level, oh, there's no hope for me. Let me say, if somebody fell to, say, to the level -2, he could could improve, he could up to the level +2. But if somebody fell to the level of -10, he could actually elevate himself to the level +10. So the more you fell, the more reward you potentially can reap, But if you all your life on a level 0, so you don't have to do anything. So you come with the level 0 to this life, and you leave this life also with level 0. Okay, let's do one short exercise once more. All right. So, sitting comfortable, of course. We'll do just Kabbalah short exercise. I won't go to the, non-dualistic exercise again. And that's, there is a right side, left side. On the right side, we know there is a kindness, pure kindness. On the left side, there is a pure strength. And let's invoke, if we can, some negative experience, depressive experience, masochistic, self-defeating experience, whatever, and put it to the right side. On the left side, we put the opposite, like aggression, anger, resentment, whatever. And let's work with the right side first. So let's see if there is some affinity with whatever you put on the right side, if there is any affinity with the true kindness. If you find that spark and be able to elevate and get close to the real kindness, oh, you succeeded. You're in great shape. And the same way on the left side, if you're able to find some affinity between aggression and anger and strength, you also succeeded. The only thing that's left now is putting oneself in the middle and unite this. Your kindness needs strength, and your strengths need to be sweetened with the kindness. And while you're putting yourself in the middle, you create the balance. You create the peace. You create harmony and truth. You're really, really spiritually ascended. And good luck to you. Thank you. Let me bring a few essential points at the end of our presentation. We started with psychic masochism. Tried to get to the root of it. And it's a strange phenomenon, getting pleasure out of displeasure. But the clinical picture consists of three components. The first component, through own behavior or misusing the external situation, the person creates disappointment or refusal. Then afterwards is a second step, not realizing that he himself brought about that disappointment. He acts in righteous indignation, seemingly self-defense. And then as a result, a third step, consciously he feels self-pity and unconsciously enjoys psychic masochism, saying, "Oh, poor me, it could happen only to me." And we tried to use non-traditional, non-dualistic methods of observation and non-dualistic methods of Kabbalah to solve this problem. So what happens when we employ this method correctly? The psychic masochism is dispelled. It turns into clarity and right action. Basically, clarity and right action is going together. It's one thing. Trader or investor, and you have been losing money, you stop losing it. And generally speaking, insofar as this monster operates inside us, no meaningful or self-fulfilling life is possible. Let me bring another example of psychic masochism. People-pleasing behavior, often confused with kindness. And people try to do it at any cost, often bringing harm to themselves. But two people are involved here. So if we do it abruptly, another person may feel that you've been insensitive and rude. So it's important to use empathy and compassion. These two qualities belong to what I call movement of the heart. And of course, the movement of the heart has to go together with understanding, seeing, observation, which belong to what is called movement of the mind. 5,000 years ago, there was a center in the Middle East. People call themselves Ever. Ever was the name of their teacher. It was a great center. There were no religion at that time. There were no nationalities there. And they didn't try to create followers, just to give people intellectual knowledge to their students. No, they encouraged self-discovery. And also, they used a non-dualistic method, treating another person, not separately, but empathically. Let's say if somebody inflicted pain on you, you can transform that pain into the pain for another person. Unfortunately, it's almost forgotten. The center is hardly mentioned. And we can join them. But not joining as a, let's say, illegitimate children, as it were, joining the family. No. Through this 5,000 years, so much problems were created, psychological, intellectual mess. So if we can solve all of it, then we can join them, in a way, finishing what they started. We can bring to the end, to the completion. So it's just kind of I'm giving an intellectual explanation, but I want to let's try to feel some glimpse of their energy, if we can. So let's get back 4,500 years ago to be together with that movement, with those teachers. And let's try to feel that energy again. Rediscover that energy. And maybe that music will help us a little bit. This is a song by Shlomo Kalba. I met him many years ago in Ohio, at the Meditation Mountain. It was a great performance. It was a small circle. I just came, it's 1979, I believe. I just came from the Soviet Union. It was so unusual. And was a great success in spite of my apprehension that it would be failure.
Please let me ask, please let me sing peace to you.
So let me finish with these words. So let be peace for you. Hope to see you again.